Welcome to the Grappling Grappling Rewind Podcast.
Welcome to this week on the Grappling Rewind Podcast. This week's show, we're going to recap Mikey Musumeci on One FC. We're going to talk about Fight to Win, and we're in Ohio, and we're also going to talk about Grapplefest 13, headlined by Jacob Couch versus Nastasa Silviu. As always in the show, I'm your host, Maine, and the co-host,
Austin.
How you doing, Austin?
I am good. How are you, man?
Doing well. I just butchered Nathasa's name, as
right.
I know we're going to do for the rest of the show. We've been covering him. We've covered him for a couple of years now. He's been really exciting and fun, so it's cool to see him main eventing on Grapplefest. Let's get into a little bit of news first. We have some upcoming events. Biggest one is we have all the final names for the EBI, for basically the return of the EBI Absolute.
Mm-hmm.
The EBI Absolute it's always kind of historically been an interesting event, but we have, I think, probably the best lineup to be on an EBI card, maybe ever, but definitely in the last, I want to say 6 years, at least, maybe 7. I mean, so names we have for the EBI
card.
Yeah, EBI 20 Absolutes: Nicky Rod, ADCC 2-time silver medalist; Kyle Bame, Giancarlo Bodoni, champion of 88 kilograms for ADCC; Travis Moore, Luke Griffith in ADCC 1 trials; Devontae Johnson in ADCC; Dan Martinez, Hassam Rita in ADCC sub cyborg; Roosevelt Souza, ADCC veteran; Stefan Martinez, Jason Rao, Enriquez Zutura, Andre Porfirio, and Angel Lugo, as well as Chris Shangoli, or I think Pat. I always mess up which Shangoli it is. I didn't take a screenshot. One of the Shangolis.
It's Pat.
Pat
Yep.
that just won the 10th Planet Qualifier. I only got about an hour into that event. He hits a crazy footlock in his first or second match. Interesting. Again, we've seen him on the finisher scene and the local scene for a long time. It'll be really cool to see him kind of throw his hat into a giant, super stacked absolute bracket. That happens on October 23rd in El Paso, Texas. That's wild. I think this actually could be the return of form for EBI, possible $50,000 grand prize. I think they're still in because it says possible grand prize if you sub everyone in regulation, which is, again, not something that I don't like that format of paying people out.
Agreed.
But to get those names, I think that they probably are paying some of them to come out, because some of those guys I don't think are interested to come out for free. And they've talked about it before. And that's one of the things, again, why Wagner kind of stopped doing EBI. He's like, I beat everyone, but I didn't get paid anything to do it. So again, 50 grand is a lot of money on the line. To get those names out there, I really hope this is sort of the resurgence and return to form of EBI.
Agreed.
That would be awesome, because, again, stacked card lineups like that are cool, and if we can see guys go against each other for money, that's what I like. So this week, any other big news this week? Gordon is allegedly no longer in One FC.
Yeah, I couldn't find a whole lot more information about that, but I guess more like a rumor than it is news.
Yeah, BJJ World put something out on it, basically, that his contract was, like, I forget what it was. It was basically like he's no longer under contract for them.
Sure.
Initially, we talked about that contract a couple of years ago on the show. He signed with One FC. Did he do a match with them?
I don't think he did any matches because of his stomach issues.
Maybe. I don't remember. I don't
remember
remember the exact thing. Basically,
I don't think he has.
They retained him for. Well, actually, did a match. Probably forgetting about it. They retained the rights for him if he ever decided to do MMA.
Mm-hmm.
That was like a thing he talked about on the Rogan show 2 or 3 times ago when he was on. And then he wasn't exclusive to them for grappling. And I think that was people talk about that was some of the differences in Gordon's contract versus other people's contract, that allegedly other people actually were exclusive for them, but Gordon wasn't. But if you ever decided to do MMA, that was always like a stipulation in most of the contracts that you would do it with One FC first. So you'd make your debut in One FC, which, again, a lot of those guys are interested in that or not interested in that. I would love to see both Rotolos who have expressed an interest in doing MMA in One FC. I think it would be a wild organization for them to make their debut in, much like Yuri did, like Buchecha did, like Gary Tonin did. We've seen plenty of grapplers come over to One FC and showcase their both grappling talents and their MMA kind of talents. And so we watched a One FC event this weekend. I love One FC. I really enjoy the production value. I like that it's not like, it really gives you an insight into the fighters. Before we get into One FC, do you have any other, like, do you have any other news or anything else we need to cover?
News-wise, I think that's pretty much it for news, I think.
Yeah, we have a bunch of events coming up this next weekend. We're not gonna preview a ton of stuff this weekend because mainly just want to talk about Grapplefest and Mikey.
Yep.
But there is a bunch of stuff. It really will depend on next week, what's on flow for what we're covering and what essentially has good results and footage and names, because right now we're kind of struggling to find who is headlining what card. Flow kind of post-COVID and ADCC sort of isn't listing a lot of the schedules for their matches, and so you have to kind of individually find it, and we're having a problem this week individually going out and finding what is upcoming for the following weeks. So you have a website that shows us that. Would love to get a link in a DM. If you want to find out more about Grappling Rewind, or look at the interviews we do, you can follow us on YouTube, or you can follow us on the Grappling Rewind, Grappling_Rewind at Instagram. Share it with your friends. It really helps us out with the show and with the listenership and viewership. Do more things and bring more content. I'm going to be up in Philly. So Fight to Win has some new dates. They're doing an event in Philly in 2 weeks in October 15th. So I'm probably going to go to that event.
Oh, cool.
So I'm excited because we're doing a tournament up that day, Simon and I, in Philly. And so I'm like, hey, it's going to be a long day in Philly because we're going to go to Fight to Win after that. So hopefully we'll have some interview content after that at Philly. So
awesome.
That will be great. So that's coming up for us, doing some more travel. And that does it for news. Let's move on to want to recap Mikey versus Cleber?
Yeah, we can talk about that first.
So some context for this match. Mikey Musumeci and Cleber Sousa are 1-1. We're 1-1 going into this match. Both gi matches, both from 2017. Cleber was one of the last guys to beat Mikey at the weight class. Mikey has some losses when he did absolute, and against guys like 1 or 2 weight classes above him in Sousa. But really, he had a loss to Doderlin that he avenged. Really doesn't have a lot of losses at the weight class, and Cleber Sousa was one of the last guys to actually be able to beat him, and so I think that was sort of the thought process for bringing in him versus Mikey, and I was honestly pretty impressed with his performance versus Mikey. Mikey is playing a really pared down game as of recently, and I'm not sure if that's One FC rules or if that's sort of where he's taking his game in general, but it was interesting. What do you think about it?
Yeah, I think for sub only, we're going to see that a lot more often, where guys kind of have this leg entanglement game. I mean, it's not new that guys play leg entanglements, but sit without having any real connection. I think you brought this up when we were talking pre-show, but guys who sit without really having an established guard already or any kind of connection with their upper body before they sit.
I got a Reddit discussion today on guard pulling, and that was Mike was one of the guys I cited.
Yeah.
In that comment, it was basically he doesn't, like other guys, IBJJF mandates that you pull with a grip. Some organizations mandate that you pull with contact. Others don't. One FC doesn't mandate that you pull with contact. And it's a sub-only format. So Mikey can, if he wants to start from a seated open guard just sitting on his butt, he's able to do that in their rule set because there isn't a requirement to pull. And so a lot of times in the IBJJF, because you have to pull with contact, you have to pull essentially some sort of established guard to get the contact. You have to pull with some control and pull the guy or pull the woman or person into your guard. One FC, he can sort of sit, and then it's onus on the top person in the grappling in the grappling rule set for One FC to come on top and begin grappling and working to pass and submit.
Yeah, and when we start talking about some of the other events, this will be a theme that I'll probably end up repeating myself with kind of the same sort of talking points. But this match was kind of not that way in terms of having a stereotypical one person pulls and then the other person plays really, really negative, just trying to like not let them establish anything. Like Cleber kind of takes it to him. Like he puts a good pace on. They're both kind of going for it. I mean, Cleber goes for some passes.
Cleber gets further in a couple of passes than I really thought. Like Mikey has we've seen like a bulletproof guard.
His guard retention is freakish. Like it's so hard to settle anything, even if you can get past, like pick good angles on Mikey. His ability to get his knees back to his chest, or even sometimes like up to his shoulders, it's so hard to penetrate anything. I really only think like him and Lachlan have guards that look like that, where they can play inverted,
fold themselves completely over inverted, but like not in that way where like the frantic trying to get back in front of you.
No, it's very calm.
Oh, cool! I've just tracked your hips as you've passed all the way over me, and then my legs they're still in front of you.
Yeah,
and have fun with that because you still haven't passed because my legs are still in front of you.
Yeah, their ability to get like a knee in front of your shoulder, even if it's like north-south, and even for Mikey, it's like getting your toes in front of your shoulder to like regard is pretty impeccable.
Really impressed her with because Cleber passes I think twice in the match where it's like I would have almost, had there been points scored in this match, I would have almost given him points. I'm like, well, he's kind of like, he's like around the guard. And Mikey Musumeci just kind of went, and my foot's back on your shoulder, and technically this is a guarding it because my feet are in front. So even though you're functionally in like passing from north-south and kind of posted on my top side shoulder, like I still technically have a guard back, and so you technically can, or kind of how we traditionally think about jiu-jitsu, you're technically still forced to pass through this in order to get top positional control before you're going to really start working. And we saw kind of Cade deal with that at ECC versus Lachlan, where it's like Lachlan played inverted, and then Cade was like, oh, cool, your arm is extended from this inverted position. I'm going to take that. I was curious because we saw really kind of a lot of parallels between this match and the Lachlan versus Cade match.
That's interesting. I didn't even consider that.
I was curious if we would see Cleber like jump for an arm like Cade did versus Lachlan, but Cleber, like, he's, again, very few people are going to be more tended, less active, or more active than Cade Rotolo.
Yeah.
So if there's anyone that's going to go like, I'm going to go for the sub, like the Rotolo brothers are guys that are like absolutely going to do that. So for Cleber not jumping on the arm in kind of a similar situation, I wasn't surprised at all.
Sure.
I was surprised that Cade did it, but in that position, I was kind of, it was shades of the same thing, and I was curious. I was like, ooh, will that be a kind of a new, not shift in the meta, but will that be something people look to attack from inverted guard more often now that Cade has shown success versus a guy like Lachlan?
I don't know if that's going to be part of the mainstream sort of tactic, but I think you're going to get more players like him, Mika, like all of like the younger guys up and coming, even like Cole to some extent, who are much more action oriented. So they're going to be pushing the pace with like subs, especially in like these sort of like in one championship, this sub only sort of format. You're going to get a lot of guys who will go for it a little more, I think. But,
I think also people are realizing that makes your money.
Yeah.
Like, hey man,
it's more entertaining.
Be exciting and we'll pay you to go do it. And I think a lot of the young, and some of the younger guys that I've talked to have like, and Gordon's talked about that specifically, and him saying it, kind of the community echoes that a lot. Like, hey, and he's had posts about it over the years, like, if you're a professional, like, people have to want to see you.
Yeah.
So if you want to get paid in this sport, you have to win and be exciting doing it. Like, that's part of it. And I think a lot of the younger guys that are like anywhere from, under 20 years old now or 21, like, kind of went, oh, Gordon made a lot of money, and Gordon just posted today that he made like $400,000 on one instructional, and I was like, wow, that's wild.
That's
in a month.
I believe it.
And it was like a bank statement. It was like an actual, like, it was like a real, it was like, oh, that's like a real number. Like, you get paid. And so I think a lot of the younger generation that are in the professional space for jiu-jitsu have realized that and go, I have to do stuff and win excitingly so people will care.
I wouldn't even say you necessarily have to win excitingly. You just have exciting matches. Because even if you look at like Gary, like he wins a lot. Don't get me wrong. Yeah. But he wins some, he loses some, but none of his matches are boring.
Yeah. Point to a boring Gary Tonin match, and I'll point to a match that's weird. Like, oh, that was weird. It is not very common at all.
Sure. So it's like you will almost always pay to see a Gary Tonin match. Yeah. You don't always know that he's going to win.
And you just don't care.
No, you don't care because it's a great match.
It's going to be exciting. And
exactly.
Yeah, good point. So, where we were at?
We're talking
about the passing and the leg. Really, Mikey looked. I mean, Cleber had some great exchanges here, but Mikey was consistently looking for the legs the entire match.
There were a couple of times where he kind of gets like the drag grip, like he tries to attack upper body when Cleber starts clearing. So I think Mikey was going for it. I think he was looking to sub whatever was available to him. Most of the time it was leg entries that ended up him going for upper body and then Cleber kind of backing out and then reattacking, passing. But that was kind of the tail of the entire match.
Yeah.
It was either guard recovery,
there was one
leg entanglements, and then when the leg entanglements got stripped, it was one kind of last-ditch effort to stay attached to the upper body and attack something. A couple armbar attempts, etc.
Yeah, I think
but it didn't really go.
Attempts that I remember.
It didn't really go super deep into like a crazy danger for submission.
Yeah, except Cleber really never got deep into something where it's like, ooh, that's really. There was one armbar that was like, oh, that could be deep, but Cleber kind of was pretty comfortable there, cleared it pretty easily. Yeah. There was one moment that was interesting in the match, kind of tactically. It's Cleber pulls out of a leg exchange, and Mikey like has double grips on each leg, has one grip on each leg, and goes to lift and kind of like stands up like he could immediately pass Cleber here. Yeah. It happens twice in the match, but one of them, Mikey actually stands up and like begins to pass, and then immediately lets go of the grip, sits back down. And I went, that's a really interesting tactical choice to make there, that like I am not going to engage in top player passing. I'm going to take a position where I could absolutely win and control on top. Yeah. And go decide to elect to stand back up and then sit back down.
I think it might have been towards the end of the match too. he kind of gets in like a seated head and arm sort of position, like as if he's going to take Cleber's back.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the things where it's like you said, almost like a tactical decision. Like, okay, maybe in the situation you're describing, he's like, okay, well, if I try to pass now, there's a chance like I could get submitted or like could get swept. It's like not really necessarily worth it because I'm kind of winning on the submission exchanges, which should get scored for, there was scored and
the
loose
referee
quotes.
called catches a couple times. I did like one of them where the referee kind of looks and goes catch, and then Cleber looks at him
back
and goes,
what? No. Yeah.
And so initially when he grabbed it, I was like, you could kind of call that a catch.
I think the ref was seeing it almost like it could turn to a calf crush or something.
Yeah,
but
that's what it was.
Cleber was clearing his knee line from a leg entanglement, so it was like, no, man, like, I'm clearing my knee.
When the ref had called it, it had already slightly cleared more, but the ref was on the other side and had walked around.
Sure.
And then he saw that like Cleber was working to clear it, but by the time he called catch, Cleber had kind of already cleared. And then I did love that he was still kind of technically in a position where Mikey could change and calf crush him, and he looks at the ref and goes, no, and kind of goes back to defending it like very, very unconcerned about it. And I was like, that's baller.
He did a great job of clearing, and when we start talking about Grapplefest too, we're going to talk more about like the meta game of leg locks and how I think it's sort of diminishing. That's hot take, my own personal opinion.
Hot take.
But
Ash Williams going to go for your legs though.
People definitely go for legs.
Yeah.
Don't get me wrong, but I think it's becoming less and less the mysterious thing that it used to be, where it's like, this is a guy who plays legs and that's all he has.
A lot of guys have
anymore.
figured out, and I'm not saying Mikey only has legs, but a lot of guys have figured out like how to not get caught with a knowledge gap in leg locks.
Right.
And I think we're seeing a lot more like, oh yeah, you're entering the legs. I block it like I block any other jiu-jitsu position.
Of course,
and then I go back to what I was doing.
Yep.
And I'm going to continue to block your leg entanglements because like now it just is a position that like I know which way to turn, which way to put your legs, how to get my knee line out of any permutation you can put it in.
Yep.
And so we're seeing guys that are not getting caught out anymore in like lacks of knowledge. It's like that kind of stopped. Or at the highest levels.
Right, the highest level for sure.
For the most part, unless you're Gordon or like a couple of other guys.
Yeah.
For the most part, pretty much stopped.
Yeah, exactly.
So it was a fun match.
Yeah.
I definitely would have liked to see a little more like risk for both guys.
Sure, I could see that. Yeah.
Just to push a little more. I think that it was right in front of a really, really good strawweight fight.
Yeah.
An Angela Lee fight and Yang the champion. That was a crazy fight. If you happen to watch this grappling match, just leave the card on and watch that fight.
Yeah.
Rachel and I watched it, and she was like, "This is a wild fight." I'm like, "I know, knees to the grounded opponent." Like,
yeah.
That rule makes it spicy.
You should. Yeah, if you're watching the whole card, which is another thing which I've said before on the show, like One puts together such a good package of combat sports that's like, hey man, maybe I just came to see the grappling, but now I got to watch like small gloves Muay Thai, or I got to watch
kickboxing or K1
MMA.
Muay Thai.
Yeah,
dude,
you get to see some more combats, and the same thing works vice versa. Like you might have come to only watch like Stamp Fairtuck's fight in MMA.
Yeah,
but then you stayed.
I haven't seen that fight yet, and you told me it was
great.
good. I want to see it.
Yeah, you should check it out.
Yeah. So again, One FC is great. I think it's really funny. This is the first time. Because One FC is kind of a unique organization that they have a variety of different martial sports or combat sports. I watched this because Miranda texted the group chat. They was like, hey, it's on. I was like, oh, it's off. I didn't realize it was on. Turned it on, watched it when it was happening. And then I just was like, oh, it's on. I'll watch this next fight. That's going to be awesome. It is the only time I've ever put on jiu-jitsu, and then I was like, well, I'll keep watching MMA now.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
And it was just like, that was the first time that's ever happened, because that's a very unique thing for One FC.
Yeah.
I've done it for a bunch of other One FC cards where it's like I turned the card on earlier to later watch the grappling match and then continue watching, but it was funny that as a grappling fan, like I probably would not have seen that fight live had I not been watching the Mikey match beforehand. I'm like, oh wow, I understand how it could go the other way for probably everyone else in the world.
Yeah, sure.
Where it's like, oh, I'm watching this MMA fight. Well, I'll watch the grappling match, and then the next fight is an MMA fight. Like, I think that begins to push the envelope of people towards like grappling is a thing that I'll watch, and these guys are the best guys in the world. Like Mikey wins the belt. He wins the bantamweight or flyweight. I forget which one.
Bantam, but then also One has those weird like weight classes where it's one weight class off of what the norm is,
because they don't allow for
hydration
for
testing.
as much. They do hydration testing. They don't
That's
allow for as much weight cutting, essentially.
Yeah, like the lightweight title is at 170, for example.
Like Gary Tonin fights at featherweight, which is 155 and 170.
Right, exactly. Yeah, it's one off of what the UFC does.
Or really every other.
Every other organization, for sure.
So, but I like it. I've talked about. I don't know if we've talked about it on the show publicly, but back when I was much more MMA and that came out, I talked about it, and it was neat. And there's good and bad about it. You can read all about it.
Sure.
And Joe Lawson, I think, has a really interesting take on it. You can look up his thoughts on that. I think he has one of the more interesting kind of counter takes to it if you are curious about like how that works in the sport. But regardless, I love that Mikey is now the champion.
Yep.
You and I were talking about potential matchups
Yeah.
for him. And somebody brought up, buddy Jeff brought up Baby Shark.
Yeah.
And I went, oh, he's now the ADCC under 66 kilogram champion. He's gonna have size parallel with Mikey. Like he's definitely a little smaller than Mikey, but he's closer in size to Mikey than a lot of other guys. And they've never fought. He's the world champion ADCC at a similar weight class. Like that for me
Be a great
is
fight
the
to
fight
book.
to make. And you can make an argument that fight could go either way. In the One FC rule set, I think the ADCC rule set, I would definitely give the edge to Baby Shark just because
I would also.
because we've seen him do it.
Yeah.
And
Maybe that's it. Yeah.
but in the One FC rule set, Mikey's familiar with that. Like, can he put up a level of activity on Baby Shark? Can Baby Shark pass? Can get on top? Like, that is a really interesting both stylistic fight and technical fight.
Yeah.
Between like how both guys will approach
I think
it.
you could throw pretty much any of the medalists from ADCC. You could put Pato in there, I feel like.
Pato would be hard. Pato's a big
See,
dude.
Sousa.
Though.
Yeah, they're also a lot bigger than Mikey. But I'm just saying, Mikey's kind of cleared out a lot of the smaller guys. I think at the end of his fight, he was talking about potentially having a match with Demetrius Johnson. Demetrius Johnson, Mighty Mouse.
That was so funny how he called him out. He's like, I don't want to call him out.
Respectfully,
I just want
I'd like to share the mat with him.
I was like, oh, that's Mikey. That's great, bro.
Yeah,
I do like my.
I would be interested to see how that match goes. But also, I mean, I imagine Mikey kind of wins. I mean, he's a pure grappler.
Yeah.
Don't get me wrong.
Demetrius
Johnson's
the
great.
Greatest ever.
He's one of the greatest MMA fighters of all time.
Yeah,
like
absolutely.
he's in the argument. But
yeah,
for someone who spends their entire career doing jiu-jitsu, I don't think he probably has a good chance of winning.
The game has changed. We've seen this. We watch this pretty frequently. If you listen to the show for enough time, it's MMA fighter versus guy that only grapples. Like, I can think of outside like an EBI style rule set. I cannot think of the last time that the MMA guy submitted the jiu-jitsu guy or didn't have, like, if they won, it was a narrow, close decision.
Sure.
90+% of the time. I can only, in my head right now, I can only think of instances where the jiu-jitsu guy has beat the MMA guy. I can't offhand think of one of those matchups.
I feel like there was one recently.
Craig
Again,
Jones,
like you said, it was
Craig
an outlier.
Jones and Sean Brady.
Yeah,
but that was
yeah.
weird, no leg locks. That was like a weird kind of rule set, and that was still both guys. And even Craig talked about, like, neither guy kind of did much.
Sure.
So it's like,
yeah, you can see them eke
won.
out a decision.
Yeah.
But, like, subbing someone is rare.
Like, when's the last time you saw two MMA guys? Like, even, like, Damian Maia versus Cowboy Oliveira. Like, Damian Maia, like, kind of worked through Oliveira pretty quickly and easily to sub him. Like, it's a jiu-jitsu guy that went to MMA versus a MMA guy. It's usually we kind of, nowadays, the gap is much larger than it was 15 years ago when we had a lot of MMA fighters in ADCC because they were the best grapplers and the best fighters.
Right.
Now the divide has really shifted, but we're seeing
that's
people,
the growth of this, the growth of the sport for jiu-jitsu to be popular on its own without necessarily having to be MMA fighters involved.
We're seeing people get paid to grapple only, and I'm a big fan of that.
Of course.
I would love to see the Ruotolos stay in jiu-jitsu, but they want to punch some faces. Like, they've earned it, man. So that does it for the Mikey fight. Go back and watch the One FC card. You watched the whole thing. You said it was awesome.
Yeah, I would definitely recommend watching it.
Yeah, it was great. So let's move on to Grapplefest 13. This one was, I think the technical term is a banger. It was fun. It's on Fight TV. Main evented, headlined by Jacob Couch versus. Can you say Nastasa's first and last name? How would you pronounce
Silviu Nastasa?
Okay. Because I've butchered his name since he won I think he won the Polaris qualifier a couple years ago. And like somebody DM'd me, and if you know his name and how to pronounce it, please DM me again and let me know. And like send me a voice file of like, hey man,
yeah, it's a good idea.
This is how to say his name. So we've had people do it in the past. I appreciate it every time. We have people from like Korea and China and like the UK, and it's a frequent thing because the outro of the podcast, if you ever listen to it, basically says, hey, if we're mispronouncing your name, let us know.
Yeah, of course. No,
and,
actually let us know.
I legitimately really appreciate it. So again, I apologize as I'm going to butcher Nastasa's name for the rest of this segment. Great grappler. Happy to see him in main eventing.
Yeah.
Do you want to start with that match and work on the card? Is there another match you want to start with in this card?
Whichever order you want to go in. We can start at the top and go back through the main events. Or
let's talk about Jacob Couch defeating Nastasa here. Is it correct?
No, but it's fine. Let's move on. Let's go.
Right.
Yeah.
This was Jacob Couch immediately pulling and then really doing what we know Jacob Couch to really want to do recently, especially in sub-only and Grapplefest. Like, he wants to rip your leg off, really going to the false reap, and he wants to outside heel hook you.
Yeah.
That's what he wants.
Like 5 minutes in, he gets like a really good entry on the false reap. There's some pretty good engagement here, but Nastasa ends up negating it and stepping out. I think that was probably the closest we got to seeing a leg entanglement that could have ended in a sub. I think that's probably the closest Couch got anyway to subbing Nastasa.
You could talking to the side of the mic.
My bad.
I'm trying to fix that. I had an issue last week with my mic, and I looked in the video file, and I'm like a foot and a half away from the mic the whole time. I'm like, cool, that's when my audio is quiet.
Enjoy adjusting that for the next 20 minutes of your life.
Yeah. I was already exported, so I was like, well, it's quiet this week, so if I can fix that, because then we ripped the whole podcast set apart to go to ADCC, and then I had to put it back in a hurry that day before we recorded, and then I forgot that the mic was in the wrong spot.
True. Okay, I'll try to talk into the middle of the microphone like an adult.
Nah, you're fine.
But yeah, that was pretty much the tale of the match. Couch kind of found that one close leg entry that could have led to a sub, and that was kind of it. Shout out to Silviu for getting like pretty much out of every leg entanglement that Couch had to offer. But
and that's sort of the meta you were talking about. It's like once people are getting better. It's not what it was 3 years ago.
Yeah.
Like people, like even Jacob Couch, we've seen him catch guys with that at the lower levels, like Nastasa. Give me his name one more time.
Silviu Nastasa.
Silviu.
Yeah.
So
I think. DM us.
Nastasa did a really good job of just like knowing what Couch wanted, blocking it, and then I would have loved to see him engage a little more on the top and like really like get in deeper into some passes. He played like you can kind of native jiu-jitsu on the outside, very much looking for Couch, I think, to overextend and like try to roll under and really make a mistake for him to get something off. And Couch was really, really diligent with like, nope, I'm going to work this thing. I'm going to play into my game. And that's probably because he has Heath in his corner, like Heath Pedigo. Like, he's going to go and play his game, and you're not going to kind of dissuade and push him off that game by, like, lack of activity or and we saw that in ADCC.
Yeah.
Like, Yuri, kind of like those guys are willing to play by the margins and really close, and that's what a lot of the guys at the top level are doing. We're seeing Couch get really close to that top level, especially with his performance at the ADCC Open and like on Who's Number One. We're seeing him make market improvements.
I think in rule sets where subs are favored, and what I mean by that is quite literally in the rules for Grapplefest, they rate submission attempts higher than control. Yeah. And then in ADCC, they obviously have like their points version or their points section of a match. Yeah. So
ADCC,
at some point,
ADCC rewards aggressiveness as the biggest criteria, which I think is dope.
Yeah, of course. So
it keeps the matches
exciting.
The ADCC train.
In both ways, it keeps the matches exciting. But there are some times where you get into the margins of a sub only, where it's like, well, hey man, if I don't get subbed, I'm on top the whole time. Right. Maybe that makes me the aggressor and control points. So like that might be the mentality for some of these guys who are like, I know all the defensive ends of doing things. This person has a really tough guard to pass. I probably won't be able to get past it. So my biggest chance to score is like hopefully
is to play a positional control game. Maybe they don't get off enough subs,
and then maybe I can maybe I find a hole. Maybe I'll be able to pass or do something to solidify some control.
Yep. So again, Jacob Couch takes the decision. Was a less active match than I would like to see. It kind of would have again. I would have liked to see both guys open up a little bit. I think would have been interesting, but both guys played with a strong game plan in mind, and I can appreciate that as a main event match. So let's talk about next match. John Hansen defeating Arya Esfandmaz. I forget, and I've been thinking about it for the past couple of days, and I forgot to look it up. Arya, what did he win? Do we know? Wasn't it trials? Was it?
I'd have to look.
He was in maybe the main event of something, or like we've covered him before. John Hansen. So I went out and trained with John Hansen in Nebraska probably about a month ago with Zach as well, and we saw like what he was doing in the ADCC prep before he went out to ADCC. Had a great match versus Vinny. John Hansen, I think, was, or now he is, the open weight champion for Grapplefest. Yep. John Hansen, about 270 pounds, maybe a little bigger, 275. He pulled from the bottom. He immediately wrestled up. Yep. He gets a single leg. He dumps Arya over, and then he starts passing.
Yeah.
and passing, and he gets passed, and then he tries to staple the arm, and then he immediately, I love the camera angle, switches to the side, because you can see John is playing for ADCC points. He immediately goes to knee on belly, takes his leg off for 3 seconds, goes like a squatting position, knee on stomach again, back up, and you see him do this for like the first like 2 or 3 minutes of the match, like repeatedly, and I'm like, oh, he is 1 week off of ADCC. He has drilled this since before East Coast trials that he won back in 2021 to just dominate positionally in points in the ADCC rules.
This was like
was wild.
Like a textbook way to see how like pinning and top pressure can still look really good in the modern game.
Dude.
Yeah, he had a really good attempt on a palm to palm. I think that was probably the closest sub attempt that he had.
He went for a little arm lock here and there, but
yeah,
really,
but just such a crushing, dominating side control to knee on belly to mount. Like, I don't know. This is also of note. It's a 15-minute match because it was for that open weight belt that you mentioned.
Yeah, which I like.
Most of the other matches were 10.
Yeah, and they had an issue with the timer that they fixed. And I appreciate that the commentary brought it up. Like, hey, the timer's wrong.
Commentary was top notch.
And then we fixed it, and it was taken care of. But, dude, John dominated this match, bell to bell. I stopped counting how many passes he gets through. Like, the way that he passes is great. The way he starts like an inside knee cut, and then he'll drop out, and he'll wait for you to chase his legs, and then he'll drop back in, get back on your leg, and drop through your leg to pin it as he comes through. Then he'll get top of your shoulder, top of your arm. He'll flatten you out chest to chest. Like, you can see that John structured his game recently to win in the ADCC rule set. Like, the way he passes over to mount, he will step to knee on belly first. He will come over to mount. He will maybe make a big step over to mount with high arm control.
Yeah.
Like, he looked phenomenal in this match.
Yeah.
And I'm very curious to see who I mean, it's 15 minutes. That was 15 minutes of the match was John's top pressure and control.
Oh, 100%. It was the entire match.
It was the entire match. He went to north-south once or twice. But I'm curious who they're going to bring in for John.
Yeah,
like that's my next question. Having a match this dominating for an open weight title, like who do you bring in at open weight for him to face? There's a lot of guys in ADCC that he didn't get a chance to see like in day 2. I think a lot of those guys are very, very interesting. So I have an interview with John where he talks about everyone in his bracket.
Oh, wow.
Before we have a lot of interview content. I'm hoping to get it out I have a small break for a couple weeks in October, so I'm hoping to edit some of that interview footage and content.
That'd be awesome.
And put it out. I think there's some guys in that lineup that were in his bracket that he is very interested in facing.
Yeah.
And I would love to see Grapplefest like with some John, like, hey, who you want to face? They're all good guys. They're all good matchups.
Yeah, there's a lot of big Europeans too that or even lesser known that I think he could have good matches against, just like size-wise. There's a lot of bigger guys.
There's a lot of good heavy pressure wrestlers. There's a lot of guys that kind of can, I think, would slot interestingly into his game, although I do not know who will be able to stop that outside of a couple of guys at ADCC.
Who knows?
So that's exciting. So, yeah, John looked great. He is now, I think he retained, or he defended the open weight belt. I think he was already the open weight champion there. So, but again, definitive victory for John.
For sure. And
look out for that content on the Grappling Grind YouTube page. Hopefully that'll be out in the next couple of weeks. I'm hoping to get something edited. Don't hold me to that, but definitely, in the near future, we have a couple hours of like interview footage there, so I need to pare it down to put it out. So if it takes me a little longer to edit, it's because John gave me very, very good answers for a lot of that stuff. So big fan. Next match we had, anything else on the match?
No, I think we covered most of what happened.
Next match, we had Ashley Williams defeating Sean Stewart via decision. This is what you were talking about earlier, whereas Sean Stewart, like, Ash Williams is super dangerous. We saw that at ADCC. You saw that on display. Like, he performed amazingly.
Yeah.
Sean Stewart knew what Williams wanted. It looked similar to the Krikorian match that we saw Ash Williams in at Grapplefest right prior to ADCC, where Williams really wanted to go on the legs, had a defined game that he was looking for, but Krikorian and Stewart here were able to identify the leg locks that were happening,
for sure,
get ahead of it, get out. Never were able to put up, and Krikorian put up more positional offense and leg lock offense.
He had a ton of sub attempts, for sure.
But this match was Williams going to his A game for the legs. I think he comes off to the back one time, shoots for like a Trarkoplata.
Yeah, so like a minute and 20 in, he threatened the back, and then he ended up with like a Trarkoplata somehow.
Beautiful transition for the leg.
It was incredible. Sean ends up unwinding it, but That was probably the only upper body submission that I can recall from that match from Ash.
Did he get to his back? I think that was the...
He threatened the back take.
And
then it ended up being kind of like almost like an inverted triangle, it looked like it would have been, and then he turns it into a Trarkoplata.
Yeah.
And then
that transition was phenomenal. Like that was to watch the control that Ash had. And it was funny. You could see him kind of post on his head, and you could see. I love ADCC because guys get yoked before it, and you see you saw some physical strength with Ash's ability to hold his own body to the arm that is pretty unique.
Sure.
And I thought it was really interesting to watch him pull the leg through, pull the leg over, and then get there and essentially it could be a monoplata as well, like the one arm.
Finish. like a Barada-plata kind of.
Yeah. All of those,
I always get those two confused.
All
but
of
yeah,
those
I think
three,
it's
I get all 3 of them confused.
Trarkoplata have a pretty good handle on it, and it seems like that's what he was going for.
Yeah.
But again, Sean did a really good job of defending.
And that was really the tale of the match is Williams on the offensive, pushing forward, engaging in the legs, and went through. Williams did something really interesting that I thought. I love that more guys are grabbing the leg that they're attacking and controlling the opposite leg too with their hand.
Yeah.
They're using that outside grip. Williams does something really interesting where he snakes both his legs from the outside, and then he'll bring his feet to inside position while he has their knees outside, but he'll snake it through almost
sort of
like he's going to start like a Berimbolo.
Oh, I was looking at it more like I thought he was going to try. There's like a good 3 minutes there in like the meat of the match, kind of in the middle of the match, where it looked like Ash was going to go for Z-lock, which we saw at So he's kind of like playing the dilemma between Z-locking or straight ankle if you try to pull his leg across.
Z-locking is the thing we see Ocasio. It's Junior Ocasio do.
Junior Ocasio is definitely like
I think Mikey's done it before too, but it's a thing that I
Mikey's
first saw Eddie Cummings do, and then him and Junie worked on it, and then I think Junie was the first person that I saw, maybe first second person I ever saw use it in competition.
Yeah.
And so for years I called it the Ocasio lock. And then I talked to Junie, he's like Z-lock. I'm like, all right, you say it. I'm gonna call it that. But we saw an entry and Lachlan recently is teaching some instructional material I saw on the Z-lock.
Yeah, he does it from different positioning, but also is really into the Z-lock recently as well. But yeah, he was playing that dilemma between that and ankle lock for a long time. He also had a Darce control that ended up on Ash coming up on top turtle. Yeah. That was really interesting, and then he ended up taking his Sean's back with it. Again, Ash kind of just drove the whole match with the submission attempts that he had, mostly leg entanglements, but was really just kind of steering the entire match.
Yeah, the leg pulling here was really interesting to me because, again, it's something I talked about in the Krikorian match previously on Grapplefest with Ash, is that there's a fluidity and there's like a leg control and there is a confidence in the pummel. And I also like that Ash... And partially, Sean did a great job here too. Like, he never gets dead-ended to a position where he's like, cool, we're going to play 50-50 for 8 minutes now.
Yeah.
And he's very willing to, he'll do it. He'll go for the sub, but he won't ever... Something I thought was interesting is it didn't seem like Ash was ever over-committing for a sub. And I think that was partially due to Sean's, really, really good defense. But I watched the match twice. I couldn't figure out for a couple of positions, especially with some of the front side, like Estima locks and outside heel hooks, when they were a little more extended, why Ash didn't really throw for the sub in a way that I've seen him do in the past. And and that's why I watched it twice, because I wasn't sure what I was missing there in those attempts where it seemed like Ash had a really good bite on something, and then he was looking to adjust something else, either with the knee line or with the upper body, and I couldn't figure out what he needed to adjust. That might be
not strategy, but maybe a game planning thing. Hey man, sometimes I really go whole hog on some of these subs and I don't finish them and then I get burnt out. Maybe I should be a little more fluid and try to catch them clean and then try to really finish hard, because I've had that happen before where in my low level local tournament things, but it's you squeeze super hard on something and then you don't get the tap that you want, you don't get to the finish that you wanted when you could use that energy on something a little cleaner. And maybe he was because of this format and he knew he was leading in the sub catches. It's I don't really need to finish this necessarily. I need to get to something that I can finish versus trying to force it.
It was just interesting. There was one Estima lock on the chest here that it looked very, very tight, and I was just curious as to I couldn't figure out what Ash didn't see in that lock.
To get the finish.
I was I don't know what you're not why you're not just going for that, because it looks like you have it in.
Yeah.
And so it was just why I watched it twice to figure out, because Ash is only getting better, and I think he's getting significantly better quickly.
Sure.
And for a guy at that level, it's really interesting. I'm curious if we're going to see him how much longer we're going to see him go to the legs, or if we're going to see him kind of do what Gordon and them did, where it's like, I'm really good at legs.
Yeah.
Guys are also really good at legs. Now I have that as an option.
Yeah, it's a threat.
And now it's a threat,
It's
and
a
you
huge
know
threat.
it's a threat, so now I can fight you other places.
Yep. Now they can wrestle up.
I'm curious.
Now they can start like pressure passing because they know that person's going to like concede their back versus giving up a leg lock.
With how quickly Ash is like making big improvements and like fluid improvements in his game, if we're going to see him go, cool, I'm amazing at this, time to get amazing at this now. So I'm very curious. Again, Ash is a really fun guy. I love the Grapplefest. Keeps bringing him on.
Yep.
And he wins via he wins a decision over Sean Stewart. But again, very fun match. Like go back and watch.
Good one to watch.
Go back and watch all of Ash's matches on Grapplefest. He routinely puts on great matches in that organization. And again, I'm very, very happy that they keep bringing him on. Next match. So what do you have for your notes? Let's go off your notes here because we're in the lower card here.
Mike Grundy versus Anders Volstin. It's a under 77 match.
Yeah, this was a decision.
Yep.
Decision win. Matty Holmes versus Max Bickerton. That was a decision. Rosa Waltz versus Sarah Greenwood. This is an armbar. This was a match. I saw Sarah kind of peripherally at the ADCC Open. And she really, in the matches I was judging on the table, and I don't think I judged any of her matches that day, but I saw her throughout the event, and she is coached by Fionn.
You're talking about Rosa.
What did I say?
Sarah. Rosa.
Sorry, Rosa, yeah.
Yeah.
Right. Rosa Walsh. She's coached by Fionn.
Yep.
And we've seen her before, and I saw her at the Open, and she did really, I think she won her division.
She did win her
Open,
division at ACC Open, yeah.
She looked really good.
She did.
And I was impressed. I think she's a brown belt still in the UK.
She's a brown belt. She won all 3 of her ADCC Open matches by sub. Yep.
Yeah, and the commentator was talking about that, and I remember hearing about that on the day at ADCC, and like kind of watching. I forget what match she was over on versus my mat. I remember looking over one of her matches and being really impressed by like what she was doing. And so it was really cool to see her. This was a fun match. Very kind of even at the start, but Rosa really on one. Sarah pulls out of one leg lock exchange and kind of clears a knee line, and then Rosa does a really good job of like essentially not kiss of the dragon, but the same way she beats Sarah's flat pass over into the guard, gets behind her, and is able to take her back in one sequence. And it was really cool to see what Rosa was able to do with her leg on the outside in order to prevent Sarah from collapsing the guard back in and being able to take her back off the sequence.
Yeah, Sarah kind of had like this it's like a knee bar attempt, like a straight knee bar attempt with Rosa still being seated.
Yeah.
And kind of like looking at her straight on. And then she turns that like knee bar attempt into like one hook that ends up like letting her get onto the back. Beforehand, it was like a really intense kind of 50-50 battle.
Yeah.
So if you really want to see...
And like really even 50-50.
Yeah, it was really close.
It wasn't like, in the commentary, commentary did a great job talking about it. Like, oh, this is an 80-10, this is 90-10, this is like a true 50-50 battle. And
they both had their legs triangled off to the side on the opposite, each other's opposite hip. And it was very interesting. I don't know. Usually you see someone kind of like start leading in some of those exchanges. Like one person wants to be there and one person does not usually. Yeah. And so that was really interesting to see both of them who kind of felt really comfortable in those spots. And I thought the knee bar that Sarah had looked pretty intense, and Rosa was stone-faced.
At the beginning, and I think Rosa, like, she turned her knee and got up.
Yeah, she cleared her knee.
Yeah, where Sarah was going to have to she knew Sarah was going to have to make a big movement to get out of it. And thinking about it now, I think that she had that counter ready to like, oh, whenever she comes up, I'm going to go behind her to take her back. So
yeah,
it kind of... In the moment, it kind of looked like a situational move, but thinking about it more with how Rosa like kind of thought about that position and waited, I'm curious if that was like a counter that she was going to look for to get to the back.
Yeah, it
either
was
coming
slick.
up for her own. But yeah,
she ended up finding
nice.
like this triangle armbar combo. And then she ended up finning.
The switch to the triangle armbar was beautiful. Right off the back, looked like she's going to fall for the arm, threads it through for the triangle from the back still, and when she got in, because that thread is so open, as you pull your leg through off the back, like she immediately gets a really, really good bite.
Yeah, it's it's almost like that 3/4 armbar finish. She didn't quite have the bottom leg over the face probably in the way that she wanted, but she started cranking on the arm. That ends up getting the tap.
Yeah, really, really good match. I think we're gonna see a lot. We're gonna see a lot more from her in the future. Really exciting finish, like very exciting match. Like again, a brown belt. Always watch out for your brown belts winning opens and tournaments and stuff like that. Like that's if this show has taught me one thing, it's that like really good purple belts and really good brown belts become really good black belts.
Yeah,
and,
for sure.
Start talking about them soon. So really excited to see her what she continues to do. We had Shane Fishman defeating Stuart Cooper via decision. Cool to see Stuart out there. If you're not familiar with Stuart's work, I'm more familiar with him as a filmmaker most of the
Yeah.
time. But we have covered him for years on the show, like a Boa
amazing
Super 8
filmmaker.
and other stuff. Go back and watch his entire channel worth of stuff. That dude's great. Unfortunately, he doesn't get the decision here. Slower paced match.
Yeah, it was kind of Stewart was on top for most of the opening minutes. He started working a lot of body lock pass attempts. Fishman had this butterfly to close guard to K guard that ends up turning into a wrestle up that eventually gets him a pass and then mounts. And that's kind of the, neither one of them had a ton of sub attempts, so that pass to mount was probably the most dominant.
The
thing that happened
positional
in the
work
mount
gets it done, but
in
it was
the match.
It was close, but yeah, Fishman looks good here. Again, and big. I always love seeing Stuart Cooper still kind of going out and doing
For sure.
competitive
He's
side
still a
and
really
still
good black belt.
making those amazing films that he makes.
For sure.
Next match, we have Shane Montague defeating Gabriel Dafron, Duck Jitsu. We've covered him for a lot of years now. We've talked about Shane a little bit. Very unique look with the mustache. I forget what he called it. Somebody talked about it. He calls the mustache something. I forget.
Oh, really?
He has like a name and a persona.
Yeah, I just see him on the
like,
scene in like IBJJF stuff a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah, really funky style too. Like plays a ton of leg locks, plays a ton off his back. Again, one of these players kind of like Mikey and Lachlan who has like kind of like it's not an impassable guard, but it's like so hyper flexible that it'd be so hard to get an in between his knee and his hip connection.
Which is funny because Gabriel is also super flexible.
Yes.
Like Gabriel has very famously, he's
Similar
in like
guard playing styles,
He's
for
in
sure.
like a spladle.
Yeah.
And then he just like goes out the back of it. He's like, I'm getting turned, and he like goes through his own hips underneath, and it's like, oh, his legs didn't explode. So
Yeah.
again, we've watched Gabriel for a bunch of years. So to see Shane like really positionally and like with the sub attempts do this well. He came on top a couple of times.
Yeah, he had, like 2 minutes in, he had a really tight Mikey lock.
Yep.
Didn't get the tap out of it, but I think both of those guys are made of like, I don't know, rubber. Like they're like both super Gumby. So I think that was kind of the tail of the match was Shea attacking legs, but then Gabriel kind of having an answer for every one of his entanglements.
Yep. And that was the entire match. It was interesting. Both guys very, very happy to fight on the legs. I think Gabriel tried to play a more traditional game, especially towards the end of the match. But Monty did a really great job the entire time, just continuing to attack forward. And I think it gives him a fairly clean decision here.
Yeah, for sure.
Next one, we had Shane Curtis defeating Ben Robinson via decision. And Adam Ellis, do you have anything on that match? Do you want to talk about?
Just that it was like a last minute fill in, and Ben was a little undersized. It was still a really action packed match considering. Shane had more sub attempts, but there was a lot of really good back and forth. Yeah. So that was a pretty exciting match considering.
I was loving when the guys like come in last minute and perform well. That's always always exciting. I appreciate guys stepping up to take matches last minute on big cards. Next match, we had Adam Ellis defeating Troy Mercer via buggy choke. Dude, he locks this shit in quick.
Yeah.
And I wasn't shocked because he went for it earlier, and it was like, okay, you got to watch. Like he wants that choke, but most of the times you see guys get buggy choked, it's kind of like they throw it up kind of hard, and then they kind of lock it in. Adam threw this buggy choke up in like one motion. He was just like boom, and he was in it, and he locked every piece of the buggy choke, the arm, the leg, and the leg through in like 1.5 motions.
Yeah. I'd say Troy, it was really interesting. Troy had like he looked really good early on. Had a couple of like early passes. Obviously, he got the side control. That's what ended up putting him in the buggy. Choked. Yeah, but it was just the crowd went nuts when this buggy choke happened because I don't know. It maybe took 10, 15 seconds for the tap.
I think it was longer than that. He was in it
for a little bit.
Because he's in it with his arm underneath the head. And then he transitions his arm from under the head to over the face. I was curious because usually in the way that I know to defend the buggy choke, and where I teach to defend the buggy choke, is you get your knee on their face or you get your elbow on their face. Troy was using the forearm here, and I'm not sure if that was the angle that Adam was cutting or not on the buggy choke. But he was using a lower piece, and he wasn't able to turn Adam's face all the way down completely and like flatten and turn him away into the mat in a way. And I was curious as to why he selected that, or maybe he was so deep in the choke he was sort of framing on whatever he could.
Yeah, maybe
so. At one point, he tries to go knee on face to kind of break the control off, but he's never able to like get his knee close enough to the face to do it. And again, I'm not sure. I don't buggy choke or get buggy choked enough to know exactly the mechanics. I know when guys are tight,
hey, man,
it's very hard.
Don't catch me out here lying. Like I just got caught in it by like a blue belt the other day.
Ugh.
I murdered him afterward.
Yeah,
but still,
as you do, which is fun. No, I
protecting my own ego.
I think like a month ago, I taught like like one of my classes I taught. I was like, hey, we're gonna teach how to defend this thing because a lot of guys, some of our guys in our association are throwing it, and I was like, hey, this is how you defend it.
It feels a little bit silly, but I mean, it's a legitimate choke if you can catch it.
Yeah, especially with the certain guys are lanky enough and like have a really good body type for it.
For sure.
I hate it, but it is absolutely a move that is coming into the meta. And
For sure.
if it's like if you get caught with it and it's deep, it doesn't matter how like out of position it is. It's
For
still
sure.
a very, very tight choke.
Yeah.
And it deserves your respect. And so I gotta eat my words on it in a very big way because I think we're seeing it kind of turn into the meta as you're obviously not going to give up side
I think
control.
more that it's viable. I wouldn't call it the meta, but it is definitely viable.
I mean, we're seeing a lot of guys at all levels throw up buggy chokes.
I think if it's the meta, it has to work for more people than like these gangly guys, man.
I think if you're a gangly guy, it's becoming part of the meta. Like it is an option that the Rotolos, the Rotolos and Jay Rodriguez and we're seeing more people throw it up and finish big things on main cards and in title fights.
For sure, it's definitely more prominent now than it ever has been because I mean it's a fairly recent thing. But what I'm saying is, when I think of meta, I think of like the overall strategy for most jiu-jitsu players at the highest level. And I don't think that's most people's overall strategy. I do think it's a viable tool to have in your toolkit.
Okay, I agree.
Maybe not the meta.
I think it is. I think we will see if you have the body type for it. Guys give it one try to see if it's there more frequently.
Agreed.
That wouldn't surprise me. But again, Adam Ellis hits a crazy buggy choke here versus Troy Mercer. Super deep. Works to get the tap. Then again, that buggy choke finish, I was going to say you love to see it, but I don't have the body type for it, so I don't love to see it as much. But yeah, congrats to him, man. It was a great win. The speed that he hit it was very impressive.
It was a great win.
Next one we have Will K defeating Jack Turley via rear naked choke. This is a fun, again, gets the back, throws it in, throws the hooks in, belly's down on it. Very, very nice rear naked choke. Off of kind of a fun sequence on a pretty back and forth match initially. Yeah.
The pace that Will K put on being a little bit undersized for the weight, I think this was under 80. So for Will to be a little undersized, it was a really good back and forth right up into that choke.
And then the last match on the main card that I got is Natalie Tavares defeating Sue Lowenthal via toe hold. Love to see footlock.
Yeah, this was a lightning fast toe hold too. This was Nadine pulls into this single leg X and then reaps and then turns it straight into a toe hold like, I don't know, maybe 30 seconds into the match.
It was quick.
Yeah, it was a very quick sub.
I was tapping through it again, and I missed it on the rewatch. I was like, I didn't see it on the rewatch. It was blink and you missed it. I like. Overall, this is a really fun card. Do you have any
great card.
Any sort of closing thoughts on the card? I like what Grapplefest is doing. I like that we're having more UK organizations. This was the first event. That was Polaris last week. I love their venue. The venue is great. I love that we're seeing more UK events showcase talent across the pond because we're starting again. ADCC showed us that the European trials winners did way better than they ever have before. Europe is starting to put out some really top caliber world champion, world class level athletes that 100%. I think a lot of people on our side of the pond, like on the US side, aren't as familiar with. And so I love that we're having more organizations over there showcasing a mixture of American talent and the UK and Ireland and European talent.
To that point, there was a ton of PSF guys on both the main card and the undercard.
They have a great relationship, I think. Within John's a PSF guy, Jake was a PSF guy. They have there were a bunch of guys. I like that they have that relationship with the pedigree guys because it brings like guys like Dante over to Grapplefest and again showcase that American team
100%
versus some of the UK killers. So
yeah, if you're a big Daisy Fresh follower and fan, this would be a really cool card to watch too.
Yep, it's on Fight TV. It's on. I have Fight Plus. I think it's like $50 for the year. Those cards so far are on Fight Plus. I think it's very much worth the money. I think it's $50 a year, and since I've had it, we've had 2 of the cards, and so I'm enjoying it. I'm having a good time with it. Again, another subscription service that you pay for, but that's how the grapplers and the people end up getting paid. So I'm happy to support those sort of organizations doing it on the platforms that they do it because you have to get them paid.
Yeah. Oh. One more note on this card. We did miss one on the main card. It was the first fight on the main card was Victoria Anthony and Haley Valentine. I just want to mention this one quickly because Victoria Anthony is a beast of a wrestler, like world level tier wrestler. And I mean, the match kind of went the way you thought it might.
I wonder how that's gonna go.
Yeah, early guard pull, and then watching Vicky kind of work through guard and kind of work through. I mean, she's pretty new to jiu-jitsu. I think she's been training less than a year in jiu-jitsu, if I'm not mistaken. She's, I mean, a really talented grappler. So I mean,
I think, yeah, maybe about a year. I think that's correct.
So also check that one out. It's always interesting stylistic matchup to see somebody who's coming from wrestling get into a high level of jiu-jitsu.
We're seeing more people do it, and I like that. It was a fleeting thing that happened occasionally. Post Nicky Rod, we're seeing more people make the jump over. It's it's always happened, and you can point to a bunch of places in the history of the sport that it's happened. But
sure,
we're seeing more like it is more frequent that people, instead of immediately going to the MMA route, are like, let me try jiu-jitsu out for a minute. Like, I'm still kind of almost in the peak or the prime, outside of my prime in wrestling.
Or they can use it to build into an MMA career.
Yeah,
especially if you're in your early 20s, maybe things didn't pan out college, or you just wrote out your 4 years in college and that was it. You're not the top tier guy in wrestling, so you're not going to be able to make a career in the world's Olympic level. But you still have this other route where you can keep grappling, keep competing, which a lot of wrestlers have that mentality.
Yeah.
So it's like, why not?
I love it because it gives us, again, hey man, jiu-jitsu guys can't wrestle for the most part.
That's
true.
So
I like that it'll force the sport that I love, jiu-jitsu, to improve the skill set and bring over, like, hey,
100%.
You now have to be a better wrestler because they come in. Again, we live in the Baltimore, Maryland area, so it's like we've always had like Philly guys in New Jersey. We've always had like a lot of guys. When you look at a Naga and you're like, cool, we're blue belt. Why do her ears look like that? Or like a white belt. It's like, hey, that white belt has a really weird looking ear. Oh, that's a collegiate wrestler. That's a high school wrestler. It's been funny over the course of the years and years of grappling, of like looking at guys or coaching against guys where it's like, I'm not going to tell my blue belt that that guy is a really good wrestler. Like, hey, watch out for his wrestling. And just like, what? Like, it's like, he's not going to have to watch out for his wrestling.
Matt Serra product who's about to like make the jump into the UFC or something. Like, enjoy fighting that dude.
Yeah. So weird tangent here. I have every match I've ever done competition footage of.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it's super neat. And I also have every podium. I have some of the podiums because sometimes you don't see guys are there. I have gone back recently and found a bunch of them because I have a highlight from years and years ago, and I found like 3 guys where it's like, oh, that's that guy. Where it's like, at the day, I had no idea who that guy was, and then now like later, I'm like, oh yeah, he's a title holder in this organization, or he's like a black belt now, and just like, oh yeah, he's won this. He's a world medalist. It's just so funny. Looking back on like who has come through the kind of local Maryland, PA area, and beat my ass. And
the East Coast has a lot of tough grapplers, man.
Yeah. It's been fun. It's been fun to watch the sport kind of evolve and grow, and I appreciate that we're getting more wrestlers into it to make my life a living hell with my broken back. So that's Grapplefest 13, great event. We also have Fight to Win. Was it 210?
210, yep.
210.
Cleveland, Ohio.
Talk about the main event. Emil Fisher versus Danny McGuire. This is Emil sort of coming out, having his crazy walkouts like he does. Guys in furry costumes and Pikachu and his unicorn stuff, and again, really coming out and giving a main event walkout, which I always appreciate guys kind of giving their own flair to it. And Emil has done that. Really, I think, I knew he did all the way through Brown and into black belt, and now main eventing a Fight to Win after being, I think, a title holder at Brown and being part of the organization for a very long time, coming out with this flair. And I always appreciate when guys do that. Yeah,
this was kind of like the theme that we were talking about before, where like, one guy's trying to pass or trying to get something going, and the bottom guy who initially pulls, which is Emil in this case,
I mean, that's really what
he's trying to play legs
historically.
He's also playing knee shield Kimura a few times as well. Good effort on Daniel. He had like an over-under attempt and another couple pass attempts, but mostly it was Daniel trying to avoid the leg entanglements of Fisher.
Emil is so tricky, and historically, like when he's caught guys hard, it's just because he plays such a tricky game. Like he kind of he plays possum. Historically, you watch it, in most of his matches, he will give up some sort of position at some point and like let a guy go for something to counter really hard.
Yeah.
And a lot of guys tend to struggle against that style. So Danny, I don't think really ever, again, black belt, Emil, your main event, knows what he's getting into and doesn't really ever want to overextend on Emil because Emil is so dangerous with his subs and his finishes. And that's sort of, where the match went. Emil, did a great job and prevented, Danny from getting any
Emil had
pass.
He did have like a really good outside wrap threat at some point that ended up in a sweep, so he ends up in top half at some point. So you could even say he had
the positional
dominance as well. So definitely a good match for him.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like to see it on Fight to Win. I love that. Again, I like the walkouts. I appreciate that there's still guys doing fun walkouts in Fight to Win, and Emil has done that for years and years and years. So moving on to next week, a couple of weeks from now, so we have the EBI Absolutes. That is on the 23rd because it's a Sunday, I think.
23rd.
So that's in a couple of weeks. That'll be a fun card. We'll preview that in a couple of weeks. UWW is next week. We will probably preview it a little bit next week. UWW is a mixed wrestling submission organization under, I think, Feel Us. We cover it every couple of years. We try to cover it. It's historically been kind of difficult for us to cover because it's hard for us to find information and brackets and seating. If you do have something for UWW or you have sort of like an in for like where we can get better information for that, I would like to cover it. John is the U.S. captain for that, and I've talked to
John
Bradley
Hansen.
Copeland when I was out in Nebraska, and like it's an organization. And if you look at the U.S. team this year for it, there's a bunch of U.S. people that are killer grapplers on both the men's team and the women's team going into this, and so it is an organization that I would like to be able to cover in more depth this year. I'm just not sure that given what we do on the show, if we will have the resources to do it. So if you do have a resource for us that would make that easier to cover for us, please let me know and DM us at Grappling Rewind with that information so that, we can try to cover it more effectively because there's so many good people on the U.S. team that I recognize. And in years past, that has not been as much of the case. And so, especially in speaking to John about how much he talks about UWW, it's an organization I want to put a little more focus on the show if we are able to. It's on Flow. Historically, it's been on Flow. I think since at least 2017. You can go back and watch all the previous World Championships. They do gi, they do no gi. I don't know if the Senior Games is a gi or a no gi event. I think it's no gi, but it might.
Yeah, I was having a really tough time finding a lot of information on it.
Yeah. And we've historically struggled to do that, but I would like to kind of make a renewed effort this year to do it if it is in the cards. If we can't get the information, intend to cover that. I think that's this week for the show. You got anything fun going on this weekend? It's Monday.
I think I'm going to a wedding or something. But then other than that, not a lot of grappling news.
Just big chilling training.
Yeah, of course.
Yep.
Starting to teach more, which has been interesting.
It's fun.
It's strange that people listen to me.
It's fun. I've been teaching for...
You've been teaching a lot longer than I have.
I've been teaching about almost 7 years of being an instructor, running the. I think I've run the university club as the head instructor there for I think 6+ years now.
Oh wow!
Which is realizing all the college students when I started that were much closer to my age.
Yeah.
And now I'm old man
You're
yells
the old guy.
man yells at cloud, and you're getting 19-year-old kids that are blue belts or purple belts coming in, and I'm like, dude, you're young and athletic now, and I am old man broken back guy, and so I'm crafty because I've been around a long time. But you've also been grappling longer than me now, and that just didn't happen 6 years ago.
Yeah,
in the way it's happening now, we're frequently getting people into the clubs that are coming in with levels of experience, and it's cool because it offers the other people in the club, occasionally those clubs.
Yeah, you're not the single point of failure.
Big.
And then they can also see different games. That's really cool.
It is really cool, and I appreciate having guys at a higher level in the room versus room of white belts. Yeah, it's cool to have some other diversity in the room, but it's been very funny to watch the sport even in the short years that I've been coaching and teaching there. Yeah, develop and have guys that oh, this guy gives me a very tough round now because he's oh yeah, all he did on vacation was train 4 to 6 hours a day. And I'm like,
must be nice.
Cool, I have a full-time job and do this, and
I'm burnt out when I show up.
It's past my bedtime when I start teaching here.
Exactly.
And you're I'm ready to go. I'm like, cool. And so it's been a lot of fun. It's
awesome.
It's cool to start teaching, and I absolutely love teaching and coaching. So
it's been great.
If you're interested in it, as someone listening to the show, make an effort to learn the skill sets and do it, because I think there's a huge amount that you can take away as a practitioner doing that. And especially when my back was all broken, when I couldn't train that hard, it was a great resource to be able to put my time and effort into to improve as an instructor and a teacher. Yeah, and I thought it was
different skill set than just making yourself better for sure.
Yeah, I had to make other people better, and I was like, I'm not very good at this initially. And so over the past, over the years, I've really made an effort. And we have some great coaches in our association that I've pulled from and learned from and asked about, and so it's cool. I'm happy that I love to learn shit from you, so it's awesome.
Thanks, man.
So, I got nothing else. Anything else this week?
I think that's it.
All right. So, as always on the show, I'm your host, Maine. To my co-host,
Austin.
And we are the Grappling Rerun. See you on the mat. Whatever that is, stay safe. If you like the show, please consider sharing it on Facebook with the folks at your gym. It's the best way that we grow the show, and we really appreciate it. You can reach out to us on email.
We also have Instagram. We have Facebook. We have Twitter. We have Google+.
Until that shuts down.
We have a website.
If you have an event you would like to have us cover, please let us know. If you have a name, like most people do, and you'd like to have us stop butchering it,
Let us know.
reach out to us. The show is also available on YouTube, Spotify, in addition to iTunes and every other podcast service. We very much appreciate your time, and thank you.